Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sports Card Madness. This is LZ, and I am here with Nick. And today we actually have a guest with us who's been on the show before. We have Rob, who is the Ex-Beckett grader. He was there from 2017 and also into 18 as well. And we're having him back on the show because Nick and I felt like the first time we had him on the show, we just didn't have enough time to cover everything we wanted to. So we're bringing him back on. We're going to get into more specifics. Rob off air did share with us some incredible stories that we want to get into. So let's just hop right into it. Rob, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, guys. How's it going?
Yeah. Thanks for
It's
coming
going
back, Rob.
great. It's good to see you again.
Thank you.
So,
You too?
Rob, when Nick and I had the idea of having you back on and we approached you to have you back on, why were you willing to come back on the show and talk to us?
Yeah, I had heard, the show did very well, and there was a lot of people, questioning if I definitely worked at Beckett, so I wanted to, tell people that I was definitely employed there and I was a grader and share my stories of, what transpired there and some good things and some things I saw, and just felt that it was good to share that with, collectors and people in the industry.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think it's important. I want to spend the first few minutes actually establishing credibility here and making sure that you did work there. So, for the audience, on both on audio and on YouTube, before this episode, Rob shared a few things with me. One is a scorecard that he actually did for a card that you can look up in the database. The card was actually graded. It has 2017 date on it. It has his initials on it. It's the card was actually graded by him and it was signed off by him. That's one piece of evidence he's given me. Number two, he shared with me a Halloween costume party win he had for the best sports costume. And it's literally in the Beckett office. I have a picture of that. I'm actually, for the YouTube viewers, I'm going to flash these on screen so you can actually see them. I'll obviously blur out his initials. And he also shared some of the tools he used, which you literally can't get unless you have stolen them from Beckett or work at Beckett. So he shared a blank scorecard, which he actually kept. And further, I obviously, looked into his employment even well before the last episodes, making sure his LinkedIn lined up, his W-2 lined up, the name was there, all that stuff. I guarantee you, this is not our buddy. this guy
No.
worked at Beckett. So, Rob, just to go even a little bit further into the credibility, I want to just understand some things that you would only know because you worked at Beckett, or it's very unlikely if you're a guest there to know these things. I thought of a few fun ones here. Okay. So the first one is, where was the place that you typically went to lunch or you celebrated if something good happened at work? Like, what was the restaurant you went to?
So a couple times we got together as a group, all the graders, and a couple other people that were verifiers and things like that, or some, bosses. We would go to Snuffers, which was in Addison. And no, then a couple other times too, like some people would go to, Cadillac was a popular place that people ordered from that was like a barbecue, things like that.
Okay.
And then like Jersey Mike's. So usually things like that, a couple people would put orders in and, we would eat the lunches at the break room.
Okay.
And that was one of our discussions we would have often during, lunch hour.
All right. So I get there's a chance people could know, they could guess these three places, but it's getting unlikely now. What was the setup of the office like? Where did you grade? What was the visibility? Where was the table you guys ate lunch at? Where was the break room? Like, what was the setup like there?
Yeah, so they had what was called the grading room. So only if you were a grader, you had, access to get in that, and you had like a badge to get in there, things like that. And then just outside of that, there was like a big table, where, you would see people eating their lunch at like 12 o'clock, 12:30 or so. This is where you would also sometimes interact with like people dropping off submissions, that were like bulk submitters or things like that. Or occasionally you might see like, one time I saw Steve Grad working, in that area, kind of like similar in the office area too. And then in the grading room itself, everybody was kind of like pretty close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happened was when the comic books kind of started gaining more visibility at Beckett, and they started grading more comic book stuff, that's when they kind of changed the offices around. And then the graders were more spread out, and they weren't in that particular grading room anymore. They were in bigger cubicles.
Right. If you're a guest there, you're not going to know that layout. You're not going to know Steve Grad came by. So that's good. Now let's drop some names. We're going to do first names and make sure, the odds of somebody knowing all these names at that time period are pretty close to zero, especially given all this evidence. So you rattled off like a ton of names. You don't need to do them all, but just let me know who your boss was, who his boss was, who was the head of the Pokemon grading, who was the head of the comic grading at this time, during this time period you worked there.
Yeah, so Pokemon was Hunter. The head boss was Jeremy Murray. My bosses were JJ, Aram, and Scott. A few other graders that were working at that time too were Dave, Eddie, Weston, Chuck, and then Vintage was primarily Andy.
Okay. All right.
And
That's
then
helpful.
myself too.
All right.
All right.
I feel pretty good about that. We know where you ate lunch. We know where you ate lunch on special occasions. I know you also mentioned that you had a private party with Patrick Mahomes there as well. When did that happen? That's the last question I have for you. Then LZ will take over.
People are like really excited about it. That was more or less towards the upcoming 2018 season. So
Okay.
like people think, Mahomes is a really good kid, and it was great to meet him. And I think more or less like the more higher up people got to meet him. No, summer of
Cool.
18.
Summer of 18, he came to the offices. All right. I'm good. I think you worked there, Rob.
I think you did too, Rob. But
hopefully the audience believes us this time.
Yeah.
I am curious though. I want to hear about this Halloween costume award. What did you dress up as? Like what was the winning award so I can use it next year?
That one I can reveal because it would be like
okay. All right, fair enough.
revealing of like who I am because
Well,
fair
enough.
It wouldn't be specific. Yeah.
I'll flash the award on the screen again.
So
Yeah.
hopefully, people would definitely remember. Like, if,
Okay.
Fair
if
enough.
I
We
was-
won't do
It was
that.
a memorable costume. All right. Well,
Yep.
congratulations on the award.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the good stuff now.
Yes. So off air, you were talking about a Juan Soto story, and I think it had something to do with a bulk submitter. So just tell the audience what happened during this Juan Soto incident.
So, couple things. So as I mentioned that, we would have like the lunch breaks and things like that. And, sometimes we would see some of the bulk submitters come in that area, in that vicinity. It was like a big open table, big open area. And one of the submitters that, sometimes would talk like sports cards, or when they were sending orders, he was known as Cade. More or less, some people would call him Josh Cade. And it was kind of funny. Like I heard him, just kind of talking about, specifically what he was dropping off and different things and communicating with some of the graders. And then a couple of months later, I was actually a part of his Facebook group submissions. And I came across that he actually, originally graded the Juan Soto Superfractor Bowman Chrome Auto, and it got a BGS 9 with a 9. And then I saw that he posted in that, that specific group that, he wiped the auto and then sent it in the PSA and it got a 10. So I just kind of took a screenshot of that, and then I'm not sure if he exactly wiped the auto himself or if, one of his buddies did it, but definitely found a way to, do something with that card. And then in the meantime, that card has been, deactivated by PSA.
Ooh.
And like the FBI got involved and a whole big story. Yeah, the original owner that bought it, he found out that it was altered. And then, that's when he didn't want it anymore. Things like that. After he bought it.
So you guys gave it a 9, the auto a 9, and then he cracked it, did some things to it. submitted it back to PSA, and you just happened to be in his Facebook group and saw it all go down. All right, that's
All right.
interesting. Okay.
So far, that's one bad actor doing a bad thing. That's not necessarily, favorable treatment or anything like that. So around this situation, um, I know you alluded to this in the last episodes we did, but did this particular bulk submitter get favorable treatment? I think you mentioned in the last episode you'd get 2 boxes of cards, right? One would be the regular box with like me and LZ, and the other one would be like the wink. This is from a big guy box. Did that actually take place? Was there preferable treatment for bulk submitters?
The way it was conveyed by, some of our bosses, they were, baking its steam like they wanted us to, make sure we were, paying more attention to detail to these orders and to these regular customers and to keep them submitting in high volume. So you did get the sense that when you did get handed these orders, that you wanted to try to, make sure that you were giving them better grades.
Right. They didn't say, Rob, dear Rob, you need to give this person a 10 or a pristine label. It was more unspoken, unwritten. It's like, you better give him decent grades.
Yeah, a couple times
that's
too,
what it felt like to you.
This is kind of similar to that too. A couple times I was told that I wasn't giving enough 10 subgrades. So then, that's when in your mind you're like, okay, I got to start giving some more 10 subgrades, because I felt like if it was a 10 subgrade, then it had to be like almost perfect. Whereas like,
yeah, that's the whole point of it.
That's
Perfect
that's
10.
because I was a little stricter compared to some of the other graders.
Right. We'll get into quotas later, but that is very interesting.
Okay. We talked about it a bit on the last episode, but I would love to understand the tools that you used and like the workspace that you had. Like you're sitting down at your workspace and these cards come to your desk. What are you using to actually grade the card? Is it just your eyeballs, or are you using some other tools?
So you do get like a very bright light to shine on the card under, because like, obviously you can't always pick up everything from the naked eye, and then you do also get a loop, and sometimes we did use a ruler to try to track, the trimming of it and things like that, and then some other times like, so a few of the graders would use, what was called like a wipe down, like towel for like more or less with the fingerprints. If you did get like fingerprints on the card, because we weren't required to wear gloves, but I didn't really use any wipe down stuff or things like that. So that was really it. And then as far as like the cube that you're in, it's pretty spacious, and then. So you can have a couple boxes next to you, like all right in a row. And
okay. So, I mean, a lot of people talk about how just the grading process can be very subjective. And, it depends. Like if the grader's in a good mood, maybe you're going to get a good grade. But what you just said was there was not even necessarily a standard to the tools that you use. Like you're getting a card put in front of you. You now have this process that you will all put it under a bright light. You will all use the loop. You will all use a microfiber and wipe off dust or fingerprints. It really depended on who the grader was. Is that true?
Yeah, there was no particular technique. I mean, it's not like you were like required to have to use all of those tools on every specific card. So like if you felt like it necessary, then you had to use those tools.
Wow.
To determine, if there's like altering or if there's trimming, that was my biggest challenge, was figuring out if stuff was, altered or trimmed, because like it might not look it, but you're talking like very, very subtle things that, you could easily miss.
Yeah. And all you had was a ruler.
Yeah. One quick thing there. Let's say 100 altered cards came across your desk. Could be trimmed, could be cleaned, whatever. How many of those do you think, honestly, you caught out of 100?
Maybe like 60 or 70. That was one of my reasons why.
That's better than I thought.
Yeah, that was more or less the reason why I didn't like want to continue, just because like it was it was becoming like a little bit too challenging. And I think a lot of the cleaners like have found a way to more or less where they don't know stuff has been cleaned, like to get through for the raiders, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Whether you can't almost tell now if stuff's been cleaned versus it hasn't been cleaned, just because it's these tools to do that process of becoming so good. So that's why it's becoming difficult.
Well, you're saying it's a 30 or 40% chance of slipping it by you. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with the cleaning topic, I wanted to ask you about that. I know that some grading companies have come out and said that if they can tell that wax or a cleaning solution has been on the card, they're either going to mark it altered, or some of them have, other ways that they're going to grade it. Some of them even just decide they're going to keep the card. In your opinion, how are they going to be able to tell that a cleaning solution is on the card or a wax? I mean, obviously, if there's a chunk of wax left on the card, you would know. But other than that, how is a human being with their eyeball going to be able to tell that?
Yeah, that's where I think it gets tough, because it's more or less you just have to use your own judgment. So sometimes, like, if you think the order is like too good, then you start to like have suspicion. Where you're like, okay, I believe these cards have been cleaned. And then you got to almost question, where they came from or who is the submitter that submitted them. So I think that's going down like a whole other avenue. And
what defines too good? Like, at what point do you say this order's too good? After like 10 nice cards?
Like if you're getting like every card, like in it, almost every card's like perfect condition of 10, from like all different years, then you have, you're starting to question it. You're like, okay. Maybe something's going on here, where if like a guy's submitting stuff from like 2015 years, or like 2012s, or like even early like 2005s or something like that, then you're kind of like, okay, maybe something's going on here. So there's definitely some suspicion that went on, that, I noticed with like altering or, trimming. And like I said, that was always the biggest challenge for me. It was trying to catch that stuff, because people are always trying to, get stuff to get passed through that extra.
So, interesting. What about, I think about vintage and modern cards, they're very different, right? They have very different issues. Did you, in terms of how it was structured at Beckett, did you have like vintage guys only doing vintage cards, modern guys only doing their stuff, or did you cross-pollinate? Did everybody do different things?
So mostly there was only one guy who specifically did vintage. That was Andy. But occasionally, some people did do some vintage. It was mixed in, their order. And most of the time that they would either give it to Andy or ask him his opinion about it. But I did try to do some vintage on my own. I didn't mind it, because, like I said, it's only a single grade. It's more or less, you just gotta say it like the card's legitimate, not trimmed, things like that. So I didn't mind it. It was just like 7 or 8 or whatever, 6, and then it's only stuff 1980 and back. So I didn't mind it.
Okay.
We talked about this last time, but a follow-up to that, Rob. What was the training you were given to be able to be comfortable grading a vintage card versus a brand new Patrick Mahomes card?
Yeah, I think it's more that you just have to have it in your mind, like start looking at the flaws, like on vintage, where if it has like some corner wear, if it's off-centered, anything that really sticks out, and then just start adding it up in your head and start, trying to really look at the card and say, hey, I think this is a 5, or I think this is a 7, and then just kind of, keep all the factors in your mind, and then just say to yourself, okay, overall, I think, this is probably a 6, or this is probably a 7, and then just using all those variables and different examples, and then new stuff, it's a little easier because it does it all for you, like on the sheet with all the subgrades.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. You had mentioned earlier that you were starting to get pressure from management that you weren't giving out enough subgrades, I think, that were 10s.
Yeah.
Did you have quotas? Like you got to put out this many 10s per week or this many 9s, or I should say vice versa. You're only allowed to give out this many 10s during the
We
month.
we we specifically didn't have any quotas, so like you could have given out like as many 9.5s as you wanted to, or as many BGS 10s as you wanted to. I know I mentioned last time I only gave out one black label the whole year I was there. So we didn't have any particular quotas up or any specific like that. So we were pretty much on our own.
Could you see almost like a car dealership? It's like, Susie, got a sale. Like, could you see how other graders were doing in comparison to you? Were they faster, slower? Were they giving out higher or lower grades? Was there ever some sort of like circular feedback like that?
So I know a couple of guys were really fast at it. Where, I know one guy specifically didn't even take like a lunch. He just took like a 15-minute break to eat his lunch. And then he was like wicked fast. He was probably 30 seconds a card, give or take. I think I was a little slower, just because I was still trying to learn the process and, look at other people's orders that I was reviewing or seeing what the changes might have been on some of the stuff that I did and learning from that. So I was probably a minute to a minute and a half a card, on average. Sometimes maybe even a little slower if I was dealing like vintage or something. I didn't do that often, but that was it. More I would say.
If there weren't necessarily quotas, what happened when you sat down with your manager and just had a review with him or her? Like, did they review how your last month went, or maybe the 6 months, or maybe you just had an annual review and, hey, Rob, you've done this many. We want you to improve here, here, and here. Did you have that?
Yeah, I definitely did get reviews. So when I first started, I think they liked my grading more within the first 6 months than the last 6 months, because that's where I think a lot of disagreements came in, and that's where I felt like there was more favoritism towards giving leniency and trying to keep, customers to keep submitting orders and giving out more favorable grades. Like I mentioned before, like about the Machado card, like there was no way that should have gotten like a 10 centering or something like that. And I gave it like 8.5. Like that's pretty far off,
Okay.
So there was a lot of things like that happened. And, I felt like it was the first 6 months were a lot more, enjoyable on the job. And then the last 6 months were just kind of like a drag where I was like, yeah, I'm not really having that much fun doing this anymore. Like, and then that's where I felt like it wasn't for me.
Yeah. Then you moved on. All right. Let's get into some practical stuff. So I actually put this out to our audience, both on Instagram and on YouTube. And they actually, like 4 or 5 people said, hey, can we get some tips on how to potentially present our cards better and set them up for better grades? I'm not talking about sketchy things you can do like cleaning or anything like that. I'm talking about real world things that, like, my 9-year-old son, he's going to send a bunch of cards in. Like, what can he do? Does it matter what order you put the cards in? Does it matter what case you put them in before you send? Can you write a nice note saying, hey, grader, I hope you're having a nice day? Like, does any of that matter or not? And if not, does anything matter at all?
Yeah, so a couple things on that is, I think you can do like a basic wipe down. If, let's say if you have a cloth or something like that, I don't see anything wrong with that. I wouldn't really even call that cleaning. It's more of just like doing the generic things, like maybe you got fingerprints when you open the card or, out of the pack, things like that. So I don't really advise that as cleaning. I think that's fine. I would, however, definitely penny sleeve it and place it in the sleeve rigid things. I think that's the best way to send it in. If you do penny sleeve and then rigid, that's the best way to do it.
Is that because it makes it easier to grab?
It makes it easier to grab when you're taking it out of the ridges, because that's how, it's going to be when
I always thought about this, and I never do it. I never do it.
Now, the other thing is, too, if you don't penny sleeve it, it can stick to the ridges, and maybe hurt the surface or something like that. So I always felt like penny sleeve rigid, And then answer your question about the order. Definitely mix up the order if you're going to do like similar card or like the same card like in a run. Let's say you're going to do like a 23D Wembyamba Prism, and you're going to send in like 5 of those. Like try to mix them in. Don't put them all 5 back to back, because then the grader is going to have the familiarity on how to grade that card. Like, cause they're like, oh, just gave this one a 10 centering. Oh, just gave this one, I gotta give this one a 9 because this isn't as centered as this one I just did. So if you spread them out where it's like they haven't done that card in like, let's say 20, 30 cards or so, then, you know, you have a better chance of getting a 9-5, getting a 10, vice versa.
Because they can apply an average if they have 20 of the same card.
They just looked at a Wembyamba and they just gave one of 10, and then the next one has like a flaw or two. You're already down to like 8-5, 9 at best case scenario.
All right.
Well, those are two great tips. I'm so happy you talked about the penny sleeve, bro.
Yeah.
I am so happy.
I've
had that theory for so long. And I think the reason why I don't do it is the first time I ever sent a card in for grading, I'm pretty sure the instructions said something about like just put it in one sleeve, like don't make it overcomplicated for us. So I'm like, I don't want to include penny sleeves because that's going to piss them off. But you're saying that that's a good thing. So I am definitely going to start using penny sleeves.
Yeah, I think it'll help you get better grades.
I just assumed, like, I think sometimes I assume the grading company just has like a magic wand. They just go like, they take a wand out and it like the card just like levitates. But you forget that like somebody in a minute and a half is going to yank your card out, examine it, and put it in something, you know? And if you make it easier for them, it's just less chance of something bad happening.
Yes.
Now I got to go buy some damn penny sleeves.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Now I need to resubmit a lot of
Yeah,
cards.
and
That's what I need to do.
I think with the penny sleeves too, try to get like the vintage ones, because those are the easier cards to put in the sleeves, because the other ones are going to be real tight to the hook to the card.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
So
Some are way
you want to
too
get
tight.
So like all the breakers use like vintage sleeves just for that reason, because it's so easier to put the card like right in it right away without having the corners get jammed up or things like that.
Okay.
Great tip.
Good advice.
Great tip.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I was asking you, Rob, about just your workspace and the tools that you use. But one of the things that I constantly question and think about is why can't a computer do this? And that way, computers don't have a bad day. Graders do.
Right.
So, do you think a computer can do a better job? Is that a possibility?
Well, I do know there's some grading companies that have started with the computer. But I think it's going to be hard for like a computer to tell if something's been altered. Whereas like how would they pick up on it if they use like an oil substance or things like that? So I think using the computer is good, but I think still a combination of like the human element and the computer is like the best tech to use, because then you can maybe the computer can identify something that like the human can't. So I think there's definitely opportunity to definitely use the computer skills to your advantage. And then there's also human element that'll pick up like, hey, this has been cleaned, this has been altered. And I think that's right now what the biggest problem is that's happening in the grading cards world is the cleaning process.
Yeah. I have faith. I think a computer can do it, Rob. Some of these things, I think advanced computers can, but it's like advanced computers, what are they going to cost? So, but I love what you said there around aiding the grader. I think that is spot on. Can the computer get the grader to 65, 70%, and then the human being jumps in and takes a look at it one last time? So, that's good.
I think we just need like cyborg graders, like a whole we need to create
like RoboCop.
Yeah, I mean we're all technically cyborgs now, the way we're attached to our phones. But you need like the grading cyborg, grading company. And then you've got like this like lens that's all computerized. I could detect oil. All right, Rob. So this was good. I'm gonna ask one last question before we wrap up. But I feel like there were some good tips here. Um, you kind of talked about some things that happened, which I'm not really thrilled about the bulk submitter stuff. Although we talked about this last time, LZ, it makes me want to use bulk submitters for my cards, which I never ever do,
Yes.
because it seems like
Hmm.
they do get favorable treatment, and at least at Beckett, and at least during that time period. So
Hmm.
it's interesting. It's making me think. I might test it.
Yeah.
So Rob, given that, so JSA is actually going to start slabbing autograph cards, which I thought was interesting. CGC, whatever you want to call them now. You've obviously got PSA, you've got Beckett, you've got Tag. SGC is now part of PSA. It's technically PSA. Where, if you were going to grade some cards right now, what company do you think would do the best job? Or where's the safest place to send? And, what do you think?
Um, I still think PSA is number one. Just because, they're getting the most submissions each month. They're bringing the most value. I know some people aren't happy here with their new upcharge fees, recently, but, you know, they're still generating the most money for stuff. They're doing a good job of advertising themselves too, with doing like PSA magazine, getting a lot of, influencer involved, getting more, sports people involved, like Bobby Witt Jr. is involved with PSA, Mike Trout. So I think they're just like clicking on all cylinders. They're getting partnerships. So I definitely would still go with them. I know a lot of the other grading companies have done some good things, but it doesn't seem like they can compete with PSA. Like it seems like they're well ahead of everybody else.
I agree with you
Rob, are you
for card
tracking are
grades.
you tracking any up and comers though? Like any maybe smaller boutique grading company that you're keeping your eye on because you like what they're doing?
I did see one cool thing that, Tag, did where, they're conducting the data of why the card got what it received and things like that, and giving you like an analysis. So I thought that was pretty cool, and I think, maybe if like PSA does try to copy that, I don't know if like they would get in trouble if they did copy that, but I think if they added something like that, why your card got a 9 or why it got an E, and then give you like an analysis, like maybe when you look up the certification number, I think, that would add a lot of value to it. And then also PSA is just like really user friendly with like looking up like the certification number like on the PSA app. So I think it's very easy to use. It gives you the part report, and that's why another reason why I think
Yeah.
they are what they are.
Hmm.
Okay, excellent. That's helpful. I agree with you on cards. I mean, if we're giving advice to the audience, PSA is the top dollar. When it comes to autographs, that's a whole different story, and we've covered that on plenty of other episodes, so I won't go on a rant. But
Yeah,
We may soon though, Nick.
yeah, we may soon. LZ and I
yeah,
are getting close.
Yeah.
Oh man. So Rob, thank you for your time. I appreciate the courage
yeah.
to kind of come on. I know you had to remain anonymous, but that's for obvious reasons. You want to stay in the sports card world, but you felt like it was important to kind of get this out there and help
Mhm.
people understand, some of the things that went on, and also not sketchy stuff, just like good advice. I think this is actually good advice from directly from a grader on what to do. I'm definitely going to take some of it into consideration. So, um, I'd say, how can people reach out to you? But they can't reach out to you.
They can
Yeah,
reach out
I
to
will say
us.
this though. If
Yeah.
the audience has any follow-up questions or something interesting that you feel like we missed, leave it in the comments here, and I can circle back with Rob and I can put the answer to that in the comments. Obviously, I can't do that for everybody, but I'll try to do it for as many as I can. So leave a comment with any other questions you think we
Hmm.
missed, and I'll hit Rob up and we'll try to respond. But that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rob. Bye, everybody.
thanks for having. Thank you.